It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because the sun was out after a week of rain, and I had just folded the last load of my grandson's laundry. I had no idea those few hours would be the last time I'd feel like I truly belonged in that house. My name is Linda. I'm 64 years old, and I've spent the last 8 years helping raise my daughter's children. My daughter, Rachel, is 41 now. She had her first child young, right out of college, and the second just 2 years later. Their father wasn't in the picture for long. One day he went out to find himself, and he never came back. Rachel tried to hold it all together, work, home, babies, but it didn't take long before she started leaning on me more and more, and I was happy to help. What mother wouldn't be? I moved into her small 2-bedroom apartment back when the boys were still in diapers. I gave up my quiet little place outside town to be closer, more available. I did everything I could. School pickups, cooking meals, folding endless socks, staying up all night with fevers, helping with homework when Rachel worked late. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for anything in return. Just being part of their lives felt like enough. At least, it used to. That Tuesday, I was cleaning out the kitchen junk drawer when Rachel came home early from work. She looked different. Her makeup was heavier, hair curled, perfume stronger than usual, and she didn't say hello, didn't even glance at me as she walked past with her heels clicking down the hallway. "Going somewhere?" I asked gently. "I have a date," she said flatly, grabbing her coat. "Oh, and we need to talk. Later." My heart sank. "Is everything all right?" She paused, then turned to look at me. Her eyes didn't soften. "We'll talk after dinner." I nodded. I finished dinner quietly that night. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, the boys' favorite. They were excited, laughing about something at school, while I stood over the stove, feeling the weight of something I couldn't quite name yet. Rachel didn't come home until the boys were in bed. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the last bit of warmth I could hold on to. She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed and said, "Mom, I need you to move out." Just like that. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. "What?" "It's time," she said. "I need space. The boys are older now, and I need my own life back. Privacy." I stared at her. "Rachel, where would I go?" Her face was cold. "I don't know, but you've been here long enough. You don't pay rent, and it's just not working for me anymore." I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a bad day, stress talking, but I knew better. Something had shifted in her long ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I had slowly turned from a mother helping her daughter to a burden she wanted to be rid of. The next morning, I began packing my things into the same suitcase I'd arrived with nearly a decade ago. The boys hugged me tight and asked why I was leaving. I told them I was just going on a little trip, even though my chest was aching like it was being crushed from the inside. Rachel didn't say goodbye. I found a cheap room to rent across town. It was small and musty, with walls thin enough to hear everything from the neighbors. I laid in bed the first night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how years of love and sacrifice had been forgotten so easily. I hadn't just been a babysitter. I had been their family, their home. 2 weeks passed. I spoke to the boys on the phone once, but Rachel didn't answer when I called again. I started walking in the mornings just to fill the silence. That's when I saw it. The apartment building she lived in had a small "for sale" sign posted near the mailbox. I almost missed it. I don't know what came over me, but something inside me stirred. A kind of fire I hadn't felt in years. I still had the money from my late husband's savings. I had never touched it, not even when times got hard. I had always thought it was meant for real emergencies. Maybe this was it. Not revenge, not spite, but something else. A way to reclaim some small piece of dignity. I called the number. The landlord was an older man, tired of managing tenants. We met for coffee, and within the week, the papers were drawn. I didn't even tell him my daughter lived there. I didn't need to. The sale went through quietly. Just like that, I owned the apartment Rachel had rented for nearly 15 years. She had no idea, and I didn't rush to tell her, not yet. Because for the first time in years, I wanted her to know what it felt like to live under someone else's roof, and not know when the ground might shift beneath her feet. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. A week after the papers were signed, I stood across the street from the building I now owned. It looked the same as it always had. Brick walls aged by time, a metal railing that always squeaked, a faded red door. But this time, it wasn't just a place I used to live. It was mine. I watched for a while from the bus stop bench. A boy ran out, my grandson, Evan. He was taller now, leaner, but still had that same bounce in his step. He looked happy, carefree. I wondered if he even knew I was gone for good, or if Rachel had told him some half-truth to make it easier on herself. The thought made my chest tighten. I didn't go inside that day. I wasn't ready. Instead, I took my time. I contacted the building's maintenance company, updated the rental agreements under my name, and requested tenant records. I read Rachel's lease carefully, every term, every clause. I wasn't looking to evict her or play games, but I wanted to understand exactly what she had, because she had taken everything from me without so much as a thank you. And yet here she was, living in a home I now owned, as if nothing had happened. It wasn't about power, it was about balance. I still remember the day she first moved into that unit. She was just 25, full of hope, walking around with paint samples and talking about how she'd finally build something stable for her boys. I helped her hang curtains. I held the baby while she cried in the bathroom because she felt overwhelmed. We had shared something real once. That made her coldness now hurt even more. A month passed. I didn't hear from her. No calls, no messages. I kept to myself, organizing my small new room, baking cookies for the neighbor downstairs, reading old letters from my late husband. But each night, a question burned in my mind. How could she cast me aside so easily? Then, one afternoon, I got a call from the maintenance company. "Hi, Margaret. Just wanted to let you know, there's been some noise complaints from Unit 2B. That's your tenant, Rachel Thomas. We usually handle these things, but figured you might want to be informed." I froze. "Noise?" I asked. "Like what?" "Loud music, arguments. Sounds like she's having some trouble at home." I thanked him and hung up. That evening, I sat on my bed for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Trouble at home. My heart twisted. I wanted to believe she'd be okay, but deep down, I still felt that ache, a bruise that hadn't healed. Still, I couldn't help myself. I walked past the building again. This time, I saw a man leaving her door, mid-30s, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. He didn't say goodbye, just walked off like he'd never been there. Rachel opened the door after he left, stood there a moment, then slowly sank to the floor just inside. Her head dropped into her hands. I could barely breathe watching her like that, so strong on the outside, yet so clearly breaking on the inside. And still, I didn't go to her. Not yet. Instead, I went home and started writing. A letter. Not an angry one. Not bitter. Just honest. I told her what it felt like to be pushed out of the home I had helped build. I reminded her of the nights I stayed up with the boys when they were sick, the meals I cooked when she worked late, the birthday cakes I baked when she forgot to order one. I told her I wasn't angry, I was heartbroken, and I told her calmly that I now owned the building, that I didn't plan to evict her, but I wanted her to know what that silence had cost me. I sealed the envelope and dropped it in her mailbox myself that night. My hands trembled the whole time. I didn't sleep at all. Days passed. No reply. Then one morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and there she was. Rachel. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look more like the girl I raised than the woman who'd sent me away. She held the letter in her hand, folded and creased from being read too many times. "You really bought the building?" she asked. I nodded. She looked down, then back at me. I didn't know how to respond. "I didn't write it for a response," I said quietly. "I wrote it because I needed you to know how much you hurt me." Rachel stepped back, hands trembling. "You should hate me." "I don't." "Why not?" "Because you're still my daughter." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the little girl I used to tuck into bed. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," she whispered. "I was overwhelmed, scared. I wanted control of something in my life. I thought pushing you away would give me space. I didn't realize what I was giving up." There was a long silence between us. Then softly I said, "Do the boys know why I left?" She shook her head. "I told them you needed time away. I think they deserve the truth. And I think you do too." Rachel nodded slowly, and in that moment, something began to shift. Not healed, not fixed, but opened. A door left cracked, just enough to let light through. But it would take more than words to build back what we had lost, and the hardest part was still to come. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. Rachel hadn't called. She hadn't stopped by again. But something had changed in me after that doorstep conversation. Not anger, not peace either. Just a fragile kind of acceptance. Like finally realizing a wound won't heal overnight, but at least now it had been acknowledged. I went back to my routines. I baked on Thursdays, watered my plants, attended my little book club at the library. I tried to stay busy, but my thoughts kept drifting. Back to the boys, back to the nights I'd rocked Evan to sleep or helped Jonah with his school projects. I missed them more than I could say, but I didn't want to wedge myself back into a place I wasn't welcome. Not again. Then, one Sunday morning, I heard a familiar knock. 3 soft taps, then a pause. The way Jonah always used to knock when he wanted to surprise me. I opened the door. There he was, taller, older, but still my Jonah. And behind him, Evan, clutching a small bag of cookies with a crooked little smile. "Hi, Grandma," Jonah said. My throat tightened. What are you two doing here?" "Mom said we could visit." I stepped aside and let them in, heart pounding in my chest. They looked around curiously, taking in the small apartment. It wasn't as big or bright as the one upstairs, but it was warm and filled with photos, trinkets from the years we'd spent together. Jonah sat on the couch while Evan climbed into my lap without a word, like no time had passed at all. "We missed you," Jonah said simply. "Mom told us. Stuff happened. But we don't care about any of that. You're still our grandma." I didn't realize I was crying until Evan reached up and wiped my cheek with his little hand. That day, we didn't talk about what had happened. We just played cards, made grilled cheese sandwiches, and laughed. For the first time in months, my heart felt like it had come home. After they left, Rachel texted me. Just one sentence. "Thank you for being patient with me. No emojis, no fluff, just honesty." And that was enough. But that peace didn't last long. 2 weeks later, I received a formal notice. Rachel was behind on her rent. The letter came from the building's management team, but it was addressed to me as the landlord. 3 months overdue. I stared at it in disbelief. Rachel had a stable job. She worked for a logistics company and had never missed a payment before. Something was wrong. I debated whether to reach out. Part of me wanted to storm up there and ask how she could afford to push me away but not pay her bills. But another part, the part that remembered that man leaving her door, was worried. Instead of reacting, I made an appointment with the building manager and asked to review the surveillance footage from the hallway cameras. I needed to understand what was happening before I made assumptions. What I saw stunned me. That man, the one I'd seen weeks ago, had been coming in and out of her apartment regularly, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of the day, and each time, Rachel looked different, nervous, small. I sat there frozen as the footage played on. I remembered the way she used to be, fierce, proud, protective. This wasn't her. This wasn't the daughter I knew. And just like that, all the pain she'd caused me took a back seat. She was in trouble. The next day, I knocked on her door. When she answered, her face fell. She looked pale, tired, her eyes rimmed red. "Can we talk?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was messy, more than usual. Bills were scattered on the counter. The boy's backpack sat untouched by the door. A silence hung in the air that felt heavier than anything I could name. "I got a notice about the rent," I said softly. Rachel looked down. "I wasn't going to let it get that far," she whispered. "I was trying to fix it before anyone noticed." "What's going on, Rachel?" She sat at the kitchen table, rubbing her temples. "He left," she said. "The guy I was seeing. He drained my account, maxed out my credit cards. I let him stay here because I don't know. I thought he cared. I was so stupid." My stomach dropped. He was controlling. He'd yell if I talked back, threaten to leave if I didn't give him what he wanted. When I finally told him to go, he laughed in my face, said I'd never make it on my own. And the boys? I've tried to shield them from it, but they know something's wrong. I've been holding it together with tape and string. I sat down across from her and took her hand. "Rachel, I'm still here." She broke down then, sobbing into her palms like she hadn't let herself cry in months. We didn't fix everything in that conversation. We didn't solve the rent problem or erase the pain between us. But we began something. And as I walked back downstairs that night, I realized something else. Sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in smiles or soft moments. Sometimes it's messy and painful and hard. But it's there, beneath the hurt, beneath the silence. And for the first time in a long while, I believed we might just find our way back. Not because we were perfect, but because we were still trying. And that mattered more than anything. The following weeks were quiet, but not like before. This time, the quiet held something different, like a wound slowly healing, scabbing over bit by bit. Rachel and I didn't suddenly become best friends again. The past couldn't be erased that easily. But there was something softer between us now, a kind of truce. She started coming downstairs for coffee some mornings. I'd pretend not to notice the tears in her eyes or the nights she clearly hadn't slept. And she'd pretend not to notice the way my voice sometimes cracked when I talked about the boys. We both pretended, in our own ways, because that's what you do when you're trying to fix something fragile. You handle it gently." I offered to help with the rent, but she refused. "I need to stand on my own again, Mom," she said one evening, her voice tired but firm. "You've done enough." I nodded. I respected her pride, even if it scared me a little. But one evening, as I was closing my curtains, I saw her standing by the window in her apartment upstairs, her silhouette framed by the dim kitchen light. She stood there a long time, holding a mug, staring out into the street. It was something in her posture, tense, lonely, that made my heart ache. She looked so small, so much like the little girl who used to run to me after a bad dream. I knew then that no matter what she said, she wasn't okay. A few days later, the building manager informed me the apartment would be going up for sale. The original owner, an older man who'd passed away last year, had no heirs. Rachel's unit was part of an estate sale. As the tenant, she'd be offered the first chance to buy it, but she'd never be able to afford it. I didn't hesitate. I used the rest of the savings from my late husband's pension and bought the apartment in my name. When the papers were signed, I didn't tell her right away. I just waited. It was a Sunday morning when she knocked. She had a letter in her hand from the building office. They said, "Someone bought it, that I don't have to move, that the new owner has agreed to let me stay indefinitely." She looked at me then, eyes full of suspicion and confusion. Was it you?" I nodded. Her mouth tightened, and for a second I thought she might yell. But then she just sank onto the couch, put her face in her hands, and whispered, "Why would you do that?" I sat beside her and said the only truth I knew. "Because I'm your mother. Because I love you, even when you don't understand how much. And because you're not alone, Rachel. You never were." She didn't cry, not right away. She just sat there breathing deeply, like someone finally coming up for air after being underwater too long. Later, we made tea. We didn't talk about the past much. We didn't need to. The boys began spending more time downstairs again. Jonah helped me with the garden boxes I'd started by the window, and Evan insisted on baking cookies with me every Saturday. The laughter returned slowly. It didn't rush in. It trickled, like light through an old window. One evening, as we all sat in my living room, Rachel included, Jonah leaned against me and asked, "Grandma, will we always live near you?" I looked at Rachel. She smiled softly and said, "As long as she'll have us." And I would. Always. Life didn't go back to the way it was. It changed, the way life does. But that change didn't break us. It made us stronger. Rachel got a better job months later and started paying rent again, insisting on it, in fact. And I let her, because I knew it was her way of reclaiming her independence. But we never returned to that old silence. Not again. Now, when she's overwhelmed, she knocks on my door. When I'm lonely, she brings me tea. And on the nights the boys sleep over and I read them stories like I used to, I look around this little apartment and realize it wasn't revenge that brought me here. It was love. Stubborn. Complicated. Fierce. The kind of love only a mother can understand. And in the end, that love brought us home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories like this one. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones we quietly live through.